Michelle and I are just going to go over some of the harvesting questions and put it up onto our Facebook page as well and ask some questions. So first question, Jay Michelle, in your humble opinion, what's the most humane way to kill a fish?
So the most humane way to kill a fish, you go online and look, they'll talk about bleeding a fish out, which is a good thing to do, but I don't feel like that's the most humane way. It's the bashing of the head right above, and I'll show you where. Apparently, percussive stunning. Basically, if you go to where a fish's gill plate comes up to their top of their head, and then you see where their eyeball is, you come straight up to the point on their little head before their shoulders start. That's where their brain lives. You take a heavy object and you smack them on the head. We call things fish bunkers. People sell them. They're in cute little shapes of like baseball bats. You can use a heavy rock, and then if you find yourself in an area where there's nothing to hit the fish with, you can actually take the fish and just do one smack against a rock or part of your boat that's hard. The key here, frankly, and again, this is about quickly ending the fish's life because we're going to enjoy and eat them. The key here is that you do it quickly and well. What you're looking for is either the eye to go dead, and by dead eye, I mean the eye, if you lift a fish, the eye is always looking down, right? Because they're like, what the hell just happened? Why am I in the air? If you bonk them on the back of the head and it works, two things typically will happen. The eye will go horizontal. It'll look like it's looking out at the horizon. That doesn't always happen, but it does fairly often. But the real tell is the fish will shake, the whole body will shake, just like they do when they're spawned. So after you hit that in that very specific spot of the head, if the fish shakes, you've done your job. Once you've deceased the fish. Now the question becomes, what am I going to do with the fish? You deceased it, which in my world means you better eat it or give it to someone who will eat it, please. Thank you. It needs to be used for something. We're not just killing to kill. But so bleeding the fish. So you've bumped the head of the fish is deceased. Now you're going to continue to fish, but you want your fish to be preserved. So you can use scissors, but I have just used my fingers, honestly. You just go into the gill plate and you yank down the gills. You know how we all practice studiously catch and release, and we avoid the gills at all costs because if there's one little bit of blood from the gill, that fish is dead. Well, this is how to really quickly decease the fish and move it onto another higher plane of existence. There's the main artery that is right underneath the gill. So if you just reach in on one side of the gill plate and yank down, there'll be a freshet of blood and you've done your job. That will actually help also with the fish passing, keep the actual fish meat fresher for you when you go to clean eventually and fillet.
Do you have to keep them on ice? Do you keep them in the water? It's the best way. And is there a time limit, and getting them to a cooler or in a freezer or?
No, those are great questions. So I live in the Pacific Northwest and I fish a lot here on the west side of Washington. So keeping that in mind, if I'm catching larger trout and or salmon or fish out of the saltwater, rockfish and such, as long as I've bonked them immediately and bled them immediately, they'll just sit at the bottom of the boat until I'm done fishing. And nothing is going wrong there. I can keep a fish bled out and then not cleaned, just deceased and bled out for at 24 to 48 hours before it starts to deteriorate. Now, the maximum time on that is the 48 hours. Like I wouldn't do that and I wouldn't advise you to, but that's what the science tells us that I have this little graph for. So ungutted on ice. So it's a whole fish. You've bled it. Now you put it in the cooler. It can be like 24 to 36 hours. Bled, ungutted, 24 to 48. Gutted, wrapped on ice, 72 hours to 120 hours, but that takes some doing and you're going to have a lot of ice, right? And that we're talking like I'm out somewhere in Florida probably doing some harvesting of fish and it's super hot. Ungutted but refrigerated, 24 hours to 36 hours. Frozen and wrapped anywhere from 3 months.
And then Amber has a great question. So she says, I've seen people cut the gills out and I've seen people just cut into the gills, slice them up, and then massage the blood out into the river. Does it make a difference with the taste?
As long as the blood's coming out of the fish, it's not going to affect the taste at all. Should you not bleed the fish, the blood will end up coagulating to the meat, and that is not tasty. I've had really great luck in just doing that, raking the gills really fast, and then just making sure that their head's pointed down towards the water. The blood comes out on its own fairly quickly. I've never had to try and make it bleed faster.
We had this thing with South Dakota Game Fish and Parks this summer. We did a Catapalooza thing where we fished for catfish, and I've never had catfish before until this summer. And they were showing everybody how to clean them, how to bleed them out. And some of them were not bled out, had them cooked right next to ones that had been bled out. And so we had the fish like side by side to be able to taste the difference. So we could see the difference in the fish itself and then also taste it. And it was a huge difference. And that catfish is actually delicious when it is bled out like that. It is really good.
Real quick, the other thing I forgot to mention, Heather, that you had asked is transporting fish. So, I'm talking about like being on the side of the river. Maybe I'm catching my limit. I'm keeping some on a stringer but I go to the truck and now what? So they sell fish bags. They're coolers, soft-sided coolers in the shape of fish, they're long and flat. You can put ice in there and put your fish in there. I use a trash bag, and I happily, if I know I'm going for bigger fish, I'll double bag my trash bag, but I'll put my fish in the trash bag, wrap it up, and then I just set a bag of ice on top, and that's perfect. And then I don't have to worry about the fact that potentially the fish is bigger than my little cooler or whatnot. But that is a great way to transport your fish home or wherever you're going to continue to process.
What about regulations? Mandatory catch and keep regulations. I know, Jay Michelle, you and I had talked about this too, because at one point on the Grand Ronde in Washington, we had a mile stretch that if you caught a hatchery steelhead, you had to keep it. So any recommendations or suggestions for that?
I work for an agency that sole purpose exists to try and bring back wild runs of fish. That is what we do. That's why we exist. So I am always going to be a huge fan of removing fish that are planted or have arrived in ways that aren't natural and that are messing with, in my case, my salmon, trout, steelhead, Pacific lamprey, that kind of thing. If there is catch and keep regulations in your area, I would investigate as to why that's true. I'm not a fan of blindly following just someone said do it, so I'm doing it, but I want to know. And there's good science behind it. Liz just described a great project in which they're trying to figure out if this is going to be a way that we can slow down the predation on our salmonids. So I'm a huge fan of the catch and keep. You're doing a service to other creatures there that are needing the help. And even if you don't particularly like fish or want to eat fish, I totally understand that. But chances are there's someone in your community who does. And so call your local food bank, if you've got local tribes, call them, talk about different ways that you can maybe go have super fun fishing, and then you all get to have a fish fry.
Do you need to bleed a trout out even if you are going to gut it right away?
I do anyway. Salmon have a lot of blood, and that's what I'm really do, right? Salmon and saltwater fish. The bigger, they got a lot of blood going. Trout, depending on the size, trout can be big. They can have a lot of blood. I'm always a fan of ripping the gill if the creature has one. Because I just don't want to get home and have done all that work and had all that fun and then find out that my fish doesn't taste very good because I didn't. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Jay Michelle.